Welcome to the GCN Tech Clinic, where we aim to answer your bike tech and maintenance related questions. As ever, you can submit your questions down below in the comments section using the hashtag askgcntech, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as possible within the allotted time. I'm Ollie, this is Alex. Let's go.
Right, let's go. Jalacare first. You talk a lot about what you carry with you on a ride and where to store it, but something I'm finding very little information about is what kind of lock would make sense to have with you on a cafe ride to present some, bleep word, from swiping your bike while you're paying for your coffee, but one that wouldn't impact the weight or aerodynamics too significantly.
There are a few little things you can take. There's like these little zip tie thing, like reusable zip tie things that you can get with a little key lock in.
And ones with a roll code on them as well.
And you can also get the classic one that's like a little cable that comes out and wraps around. People use those.
Small little plastic case with, it's almost like a glorified brake cable.
Yeah.
You can slot that into your back pocket or your saddlebag pretty easy. But I think it's worth pointing out that this sort of style of lock really isn't going to deter many people from taking your bike. Because if you wanted to really just wrench on it, chances are you might break it.
I would say, yeah, and if anyone has a pair of snips, they're straight through it. And so it's like it doesn't allow you to, it solves a problem that doesn't exist. Because there isn't a lock that is strong enough that you would want to leave your bike in a place where you can't see it. If you're leaving your bike in a place where you can see it, then you don't need a lock. Like,
it's really more of a, those lightweight ones are really more of a like deterrent than actually stopping someone.
Yeah. But when we go out riding at a weekend and we want to ride to a cafe, or when we're out filming and we've got bikes and whenever we stop and get some lunch, we always just, I've never taken a lock with me.
I have never taken a lock.
And my friends never take locks with us. And what we do is we almost, like you definitely choose cafes
for the location where you can put your bike.
Yeah, that's part of it. So
100%.
you choose a cafe where you know it's a place where you can sit, where you can see your bike, or you can sit next to your bike. And that's what people do. So that's the solution, really.
Yeah, don't just leave your bike out in the high street. My local bike shop, and kind of your local bike shop, has a place inside you can put your bikes, keep them safe. Okay, next question. Who's it from?
Is from Kev Shields, who says, "Hi, can you please tell me if there is a way of calculating watts, as back in the day, in the 1970s, we didn't have power meters. Say if the rider was 70 kilograms riding a 10-mile time trial of 22 minutes, it would be great to know what was the power we were putting out." Love the show. Right, so there are ways in which you can kind of back calculate this, but it is always going to be an estimation. Now, the accuracy of that estimation will depend on how good and how much information and how accurate the added information you can put into the calculation is. But if you were to use, say, a tool like my windsock, you can go on there and then you can calculate the watts required to ride 22 minutes on a particular time trial course. But then you're going to have to put in variables, such as a value for the rolling resistance of the tyres that you're using, the total system weight. It's not just the rider, it's the system weight is more important of you and your kit and the bike. And then also you're going to have to put in an approximation for your drag coefficient. Now, you could get a pretty good approximation of that based around known measured data. Yeah. So people have gone out and done, if you search for this on the internet, you can find examples of what, say, a road bike rider on the drops, what their typical drag coefficient is, and then add stuff on. So you can play around with a tool like that and get a good idea of what sort of watts you may have been producing.
Yeah, it's a good way of estimating it. But I think, as you've already said, you're never going to get like an accurate representation of it. And also testing that's conducted now isn't always going to be that representative of stuff that was available in the 70s. Like, no one's going to be able to accurately test the rolling resistance of a tyre now that was available in the 70s.
Yeah, but there is data out there. But yeah, you could have a play and have a good idea.
Right.
So, but the other thing I'd say is just statistically speaking, if you were doing 22 minutes in the 1970s, I'm pretty confident in saying that if you were riding 10s now, you'd be doing 19s.
Based on the equipment and advancements. Okay. Yeah. Dave next. A good chemistry question for Dr. Ali. It's understood that a tyre filled by a CO2 cartridge bleeds the CO2 quickly after being filled over the next few days. Why aren't these cartridges filled with plain air? Plain air isn't flammable and the air would stay in the tyre longer.
Right. Firstly, I don't think that is necessarily that true. I mean, I'm not aware of CO2 bleeding. It might bleed slightly quicker, but it's not bleeding massively quicker.
But presumably that's down to the size of the molecules in the air.
Yeah.
That's a bit of chemistry knowledge from me.
Yeah, but like, I mean, the size of like a CO2 molecule isn't actually that's actually bigger than other molecules contained within air. Like there are smaller molecules in air than CO2.
So we can probably rule that out as being a real big issue.
And the biggest component of air is nitrogen.
Yeah.
And nitrogen is only slightly bigger than a CO2 molecule. It's like, I think it's like, well, I don't know, it's like 3.3 nanometers versus like 3.6 nanometers.
Yeah,
it's not much,
I think that's definitely right, yeah.
Well, anyway, like it's not much. It's not much in it. What is the bigger thing? And then we also checked this and like looked it up, is it's more down to like the sort of the physics of compressing gases. So you can get more CO2 in a CO2 canister than you can if you compressed actual air. Plus, it's easier to compress CO2.
Yeah.
Because when the gas is in the little canister, it's actually in there as a liquid.
Yeah, that's the thing that surprised me. Was I was making the assumption that CO2 canisters were filled with it in an air form, but it's not. They're actually filled with the CO2 in a liquid form and then sealed off, and then it goes to a gas as it changes temperature, which makes total sense when you think about it like that. But off the cuff, you think they're somehow getting air in there.
Yeah,
no.
But then it's so CO2 is like, it's easier to compress and liquefy CO2 than it is air, because that requires liquid nitrogen. It's like minus 196 degrees Celsius or something like that.
Well, and all the different components of air would go from gas to a liquid at different temperatures and states. So then it just makes it far more complicated, isn't it?
Yeah.
There you go.
So just having one thing in there, yeah. And CO2 is inert. Nitrogen's also inert, but it has a much lower,
I can't think of the term. It's more inert.
No, they're both pretty inert, but the nitrogen has a much lower point at which it becomes a liquid.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we've cleared that up.
Yeah.
Thanks. Right, Gabs next, or Gabizel 3. Are heavier riders more susceptible to perineum numbness on a turbo trainer? I had...
Perineum being the technical term for gooch.
Yes. I had a proper bike fit, and out in the real world, there are many bumps or changes in gradients where I'm forced into riding into different cycling positions. When I sit on the turbo trainer, I'm in one position. I find myself feeling numbness after about 15 minutes and have to switch positions. I am a heavier rider and would theoretically having more pressure regardless on my sit bones.
Yeah, you've answered your own question.
Yeah.
It's exactly that. Like it is out in, when the angle of the road, the gradient changes either up or down, that changes the way you are sitting on the saddle. And so if you are, on just the same level, flat all the time on your turbo trainer.
You're just very static, aren't you?
And that's one of the reasons why it's hard riding indoors.
You interact with the bike very differently when you're outside riding compared to how you interact with it on the static trainer. And I'm in complete agreement with what you said. You're in and out of the saddle, you're climbing, you're downhill, you may be stopping at traffic lights, junctions. I think that's making the big difference rather than being locked in that position. I think it's almost like a skill to learn riding the turbo trainer, to remember to do all these little tricks and tips to make riding it more comfortable.
Yeah, and kick a climb. Wahoo kick a climb can be a thing that helps with that.
Yeah.
Cool. So next question is from Shatopo Ruhr, who says, all your bike cleaning videos contain usage of a water hose outside of the house. Not everybody has access to a water hose and a place outside to wash their bike, or car stations willing to let you wash the bikes. So the question is, how do you wash a bike in an urban environment when all you have is an apartment in a block? We've done a video on it.
And when we're away traveling, quite often we don't have facilities to wash a bike, so I put the bike into the shower sometimes.
Well, that's what we do in the
Carefully
video.
wash it.
So we'll post a link to the video so
Yeah.
you can watch it. But the video exists how to wash your bike if you live in an apartment or a flat. Yeah, so we've done a video all about it.
What I would want to just point out quickly, though, is I would really be mindful of what lubricants and chemicals and degreasers and cleaners you're using. You want to make sure everything's eco and biodegradable. Don't be putting nasties down like domestic drains. Let's be clear on that.
Next question is from, and it's our last question this week. It's from Jonas Vieth, who says, and this was on the video for my new Canyon Air Road.
Just to mention that you got a new Canyon Air Road.
Flex. And he said, Ollie mentioned that he puts 80mm of sealant in his 28mm tyres. Most brands would recommend half of that. Does more only add more weight, or does it also add rolling resistance?
Right, come on, answer for yourself here. What's the theory here?
So it's just, I like banging in loads for just everyday riding, just because it just helps. But when and as far as I'm aware, there's not an impact on rolling resistance.
No, I think if there is, it would be minuscule.
Yeah, like really hard to measure. So much so that I'm not bothered about that. The bigger thing is the weight, but it's a trade-off against practicality. And so having a bit more sealant in there is just a bit more practical for like everyday riding.
Yeah.
However, if I'm going performance and I'm doing an event where I really want to optimize my bike, which I love doing, then I will run like half that amount of sealant.
Yeah.
Or potentially run a lightweight TPU inner tube.
We're trying to get the letters, John.
Yeah, so I know that like Pirelli do suggest that you can do that in events like a hill climb event where you wanted to save that extra bit of weight, and that's going to be a bit more critical.
Yeah, I quite like your thought process of tweaking your bike setup relative to the goal that you're trying to achieve. General riding, well, I really just don't want to get a puncture, so it makes perfect sense. Although it is a little bit of a faff to take some sealant out, but such is life if you want to like maximise your bike performance.
Well, I think also it's like with the amount of riding I do, I tend to do loads of riding, and I've worn my tyres down quite a bit because I do thousands of kilometres, to the point where when I get round to that big event where I really want to...
Might bosh some fresh tyres on.
I might put some fresh tyres on.
Some freshies.
Yeah.
All right, fair. That's it for this week's GCNTech Clinic. I say it every week. I'll apologise if we didn't get to your question, but be persistent and we'll get to it in the coming weeks. Right, we're out of here. I'm hungry. It's time for lunch. See you later.
Bye.